of shoes and charged them to me. But my dad did that, and he said, I had never heard this term until I was interviewing him. He said, I did day work. You know, that meant not working on the farm, but going away. He worked with the WPA, is that the correct, in Enfield. That's where he worked for quite a while. And when we'd go through Enfield, he'd always say, this is the place where I really got my start. But talking about a caste system, my dad didn't want my mother to marry him because he said he didn't have anything and he was uneducated. And my mother finished the 10th grade and she became a teacher without any formal education. And she knew math. I would still be sitting in algebra if it wasn't for her. She knew math, and I said, where did you learn all of this? And she said, Mr. Fuller Lowry went away. He got educated at McKendree College, and he came back here and he taught math, and I love math. So, and out of 6 children, he only had one that, my mother loved math. She said, out of 6 children, I only had one child that didn't have math anxiety. But our people did go away to work. Some went to Baltimore, some went to Detroit. They went many other places to work. And speaking of health care, I remember Dr. Robinson, but you know what? I also remember Dr. Roscoe McMillan, that he was so good to our people. My sister had an allergy and she couldn't work on the farm, and she was allergic to the sun and green vegetation. And once, when my mom always told this story, once when she swelled and my dad took her one Sunday morning to Dr. Roscoe, and Dr. Roscoe took her in his home, and in the living room he treated her. He had to cut her clothes off of her. But we've always had friends. You know, the Livermores in Pembroke. I worked at Paid Supply all through college. I had to really talk it up because my dad said, you need to come back here on the farm and work. But I wasn't a good farm worker. My siblings say that I was lazy, but I tell them that I was the smartest one in the family because I knew how to get out of that work. Once when I got my report card, my dad was way back in a field plowing, and I took my report card to show it to him, and he said, Shug, as long as you bring in a report card like that, I don't care whether you work on this farm or not. And so that was my ticket. I did my undergraduate work at Pembroke because I came from a large family, and 2 of my sisters attended Coker College. We couldn't go to college in other colleges in North Carolina, but here Coker in Hartsville, South Carolina, came to Pembroke and recruited students. And so 2 of my sisters attended there. And my brother went to Wake Forest. So I was very close to my brother. And he had attended So he went to Mars Hill College, kind of as a prep school. And then he got into to Wake Forest. And when I came along, I was the last one. My dad said, I had applied to Mars Hill and been accepted. And my dad said, Rosa, I can't send you there. I just absolutely do not have the money. And I was, I was all summer long, I was sick. I just wanted, how you are when you're young, you want to go away from home. But I am fortunate that I went to Pembroke to school because it was a school for training teachers. And I always knew that I would be a teacher. And I learned so much from my Indian teachers about compassion and helping students. And I'm just going to call his name, Mr. Joe Sampson. I had a sister that had some learning deficiencies, and my mother said to me that summer, she said, I want Mr. Joe to teach my sister. And anyway, I said, Mom, I've always wanted him for a teacher. You know how you're in school and you learn who the good teachers are, and the teachers that will treat you well. And she said, but I think it would be best if you didn't. I don't want both of you in the same class. And so I saw Mr. Joe in the grocery store, and I said to him, Mr. Joe, I told him the story, and I said, I've always wanted you for a teacher. And he said, I can teach you and your sister. I'll guarantee you I can. And so I always say he was before Skinner because he knew behavior modification. And my sister could hit a ball out of the park. I never hit a ball in my life. In PE, I couldn't hit the ball, couldn't do any of that. But he gave us points for what we could do academically and socially and physically. And that's how we thrived that year. But I did attend Pembroke, and I'm so glad I did. And I'm going to tell you something. I taught inner city Charlotte, and while I was teaching there, my principal said, you are probably one of the best reading teachers I've ever had. And he said, could some of my teachers come and serve you teaching reading? And I said, sure. And I had teachers come in my classroom who had graduated from UNC Chapel Hill and had never had a class in methods. You go in there and you learn theory and all that, but Dr. Herbert Oxendine knew that you needed methods on how to deal with children, he even had us writing on the chalkboard so you could write straight. You did manuscript and cursive. But it was just a great experience. I love PSU. I do, for what it did for me. And then I went on I had 2 children and was working a job, and I went to Appalachian and got my master's in reading. And I take pride in saying that I can teach anyone. I could teach any child to read. I really could. I had children in inner city Charlotte, and they had a dialect that I didn't understand. The first day I was asked if I had a case quarter. I'd never heard that term. And of course, I'm just open. I said, I don't know what a case quarter is. And the whole class laughed. You know, and then going to the lunch cafeteria, they would say, so-and-so bogarted me. I didn't know what that was. So I said to my class, I have learned from you. You know, you can learn from children. And so I know that when Gwen taught school, she would always take the words that children mispronounced, and we had that in our communities. But taking those words and then not educating children out of their culture. You know, we shouldn't do that. We should help them and always show them standard English and the correct way to say it. But I've had a good ride. You know, I just loved teaching. And when I was an adult, my dad said to me, my mother taught him to read. He was functionally literate, and he read aloud. And back then, they told you not to let children, when they were to read silent, not to let them read aloud. I closed my door, and I did what I knew was best, and my children learned to read. My dad said, I said, why do you read it aloud? He said, when I hear it, I can remember it. So there's a whole lot we learned from our parents, didn't we? We learned about the struggle. I just thank you, Janice. I wish there were more young people hearing this story, because a lot of our young people don't understand the struggle that we've had. I remember going in the drugstore. You could go in there in Lumberton and order, and you couldn't sit in a booth and drink or eat whatever you had ordered. You had to go out on the street or in the car and eat it. And then a lot of our people went to 4th Street. Remember that? Because they could get food and be treated right. But Pembroke every once in a while would have a restaurant. But you know what? I was grown, married, with children before I ever went out with my entire family to eat in a restaurant. Said white only, you know, and colored with water fountains and everything. There was lots of deep discrimination. And so even my grandfather discriminated against my dad, you know, because he didn't think he was the caliber of person that he wanted his daughter to marry. And I'm going to tell you something. My dad helped him save his land. Yes, in the end. And when he became ill with cancer, he lived with us for a year. And my dad said, I often thought about, he never called him anything but your pa. He said, I often thought about your pa. One time when I was bathing him, he reached up and patted me on the back and said, Lonnie, you're better to me than some of my children. And my dad said to me that was an apology.
Going back something, talk about we think we've done something, but